Here we are.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome to the American Alpine Club Clubhouse Live.
I'm Emily Harrington.
I'm Adrian Ballinger.
And we're here to give you a short presentation.
Short.
Followed by any questions that you guys may have. It's kind of happy hour, so we have margaritas. Cheers.
Cheers. We are at home, as you can imagine, as you probably all are as well. We're in Tahoe. And we're really excited to get to do this because any sort of like hangouts, even on Zoom, feel pretty good. I miss hanging out with people. I bet a bunch of you do too. So here we go. We're going to dive in.
We are going to dive in. So we're going to share our screen.
And we're going to press play.
I'm going to press play.
Huh. Play.
All right.
Ready?
I'm ready. So we are going to start off tonight with a little intro into how we got here, both as human beings, as professional climbers, and as partners.
So cute.
And kind of like
partners. How we got here in this house in Tahoe.
Okay, so my name is Emily. I am a professional rock climber. I now live in Tahoe City. And I actually grew up in Colorado. I'm from Colorado, born and raised in Boulder. And I did not grow up climbing initially. I grew up skiing. I was a ski racer. Started skiing when I was about 2 years old. It was my total passion in life. And I started ski racing when I was about 7. I raced until I was 11 years old, which is when I discovered climbing.
Wait, what was your home mountain?
Home mountain, Eldora.
Yes. Is that Eldora?
No, actually, that's a race in Crested Butte.
I haven't seen these photos in a while.
So I discovered climbing when I was 10 years old, actually at the Boulder Reservoir on a little artificial wall out there. And as soon as I discovered climbing, I quit skiing altogether. I was one of the first generations of kids who did not start out climbing outdoors. I started out in a gym, and I essentially grew up in a climbing gym, discovered climbing competitions, and that was my whole understanding of what climbing was. It was climbing on plastic and competing. And into my teenage years, I was solely focused on climbing competitions. That was my thing. I was super competitive as a kid, and that definitely carried over. I became a national.
She's still super competitive.
I am kind of competitive, but so I became national champion sport climber 5 times from the ages of 16 to 23. And I went from nationals to, I started doing World Cups when I was 16 years old. And also sort of parallel to me delving into competitions and becoming successful at competitions, I did get the opportunity to go outdoors, and I discovered sport climbing, which translates really well from indoor climbing. It's very safe, it's very gymnastic, it's very physical. And I sort of applied the same mindset that I did to competitions to outdoor climbing. I wanted to climb really hard, and that's really all that I cared about. Sport climbing is still one of my main focuses just because I really love it. I find the whole process of finding a route that feels impossible, like this challenge that seems totally impossible and not doable at first, and then sort of chipping away at it and solving the puzzle, to be really fascinating. It's always different, it's always interesting, and yet it's incredibly challenging mentally and emotionally because you get so invested in it. That said, sport climbing is also incredibly frustrating. And sometimes, actually in my early 20s, I started to realize that I needed a break from that style of sport climbing, because it really does, you start to get tunnel vision and you get kind of obsessed, or at least I do, and there's a lot of failure involved. So after a while, it kind of feels like you're just beating your head against the wall, failing over and over again. And for me, it was pretty exhausting and pretty tiring. So what I discovered was that the best way to combat that sort of burnout, you could call it, is to mix up the disciplines. So I started to try other styles of climbing and other activities. And I realized, this was in my early 20s, that if I wanted to be a climber for the rest of my life, if I wanted to make it my career, I needed to experience it outside of this tiny little niche of what I understood it as, which was sport climbing and competitions. I needed to diversify. Another thing that I did was I rediscovered skiing. I had quit to start climbing, like just written it off as something I didn't want to do. But I was 11 years old. So then I rediscovered it. And thankfully it is like riding a bike. When you grow up a ski racer, you pick it back up fairly quickly. And I totally fell in love with skiing again. I also fell in love with big wall climbing. I found it to be the perfect combination of sort of adventure and challenge and hard climbing, similar to sport climbing. So that was something that I was really drawn to. I was also given the opportunity, very fortunate, to travel to places like the Himalaya. I took my first trip to the Khumbu in 2011 to Nepal, to the Khumbu Climbing Center. I was invited there by Conrad Anker, one of my teammates on the North Face team. And I was invited there to teach climbing skills to high altitude workers, to Sherpa. And it really opened my eyes to this entirely new world of climbing that I had no idea existed, or not that I didn't know it didn't exist, but I just didn't think I was interested in it until I was actually there. And I got to see how big those mountains were and how inspiring it was. And the following year, in 2012, I was invited on an expedition to Mount Everest, also by Conrad. And that trip changed my life in a lot of ways. One of the biggest things that I learned on Mount Everest was how to suffer for long periods of time. So instead of like looking at a rock climb and trying to like figure it out and failing over and over again and then going home to the comfort of your home and your bed, it was like a 3-month expedition of feeling essentially like shit the entire time, not understanding how I dealt with altitude, being really sick. Technically and exposure wise, like climbing that mountain wasn't very difficult for me, but in terms of like all the other things going on, the altitude and the suffering, it was pretty intense for me. And one of the things that I appreciated most about that experience was the feeling when it was all over. The type 2 fun aspect.
Like so much of big mountains.
Yes, I got a good taste of that. I was 25 years old. Another thing that happened in 2012 was on Everest was I met Adrian.
Yes.
He's right here. He is a big mountain climber and skier, as well as a high altitude climber.
You have a drink in hand in that photo as well.
And a rock climber. And so I think in the beginning it felt like a really good match. This is an actual photo of the night that we met.
2012.
Like right there. We'd probably met, like been hanging out for like 30 minutes at that point.
18,000 feet, 17,500 feet at base camp on Everest. Like, it's so amazing. Is this a Chris Harrington photo?
I don't know.
Andy?
I have no idea who's
Well, thank you to whoever took it. It's so fun.
It's just in my phone forever now.
Is this me? Am I taking over?
You're taking over.
Just like that. So I wanted to give you a little background into how I got to this photo as well. The pinnacle of my life and career. And my story starts way back as well, you know, in my pro rollerblader days. As you can probably guess from this photo, I never made it pro rollerblading, even though I really, really wanted to. But people always ask how I ended up as a quote unquote professional climber. And like, the only thing I remember from this photo and this time in my life is whatever I did, especially around sports, I was completely average or below average at, but I was completely obsessed with. Whatever I was trying, I just couldn't let go of. And that included rollerblading with my Walkman hanging out on my wrist in my Nike t-shirt, oversized and tucked in, to my high-waisted shorts. I love this photo. wait, can I tell side story? The way this photo got started being in my slideshows is I was actually giving a slideshow.
This photo is in my phone also.
Yeah, I was giving a slideshow probably like 6 years ago in Squaw to like my hometown Tahoe crowd, probably like 600 people there. And I was giving a slideshow on like failing on Mount Everest or something like that. And as I'm going, I see on my screen the next photo and the current photo, you know, while the main photo is on the screen. And I suddenly see the next photo is this. I hadn't seen it in 20 years. Emily had gotten it from a friend or, you know, my family, from my dad, and she had snuck it into my slideshow, and there was nothing I could do except roll onto it, and it had no place in my show, and I had no idea what I was going to say about it. And it was definitely the highlight of the night, and it's since been in every slideshow I've given since. So thanks for that. So after that aside, you know, I couldn't let go of rollerblading, but thankfully I also got introduced to climbing when I was 12 years old, or in this case, I actually got introduced to rappelling off my deck in my climbing shoes in the snow. And I thought at that time, rappelling was absolutely the coolest part of climbing. So I would spend days doing this, like getting higher and higher on my house and then rappelling off of it, which was pretty fun. And that kind of led to me choosing a career as a mountain guide and eventually a sponsored athlete. But really, it didn't start as a clear path. I mean, it's just not true to say it was a path at all. Climbing and skiing for me were really just a hobby through middle school, through high school, and into college. And I ended up going to school in Washington, D.C., not exactly an outdoor mecca, as I'm sure some of you know. And I was a pre-med student there. I graduated from college, got accepted to medical school, and I deferred my med school acceptance for a year to get climbing and skiing out of my system. That was the plan. And 20 years later, here we are, definitely not a doctor. And yeah, you know, it's really, this photo is from the summit of Mount Everest, I think in 2010. And it's really been my time in the Himalaya as a guide, a climber, a skier, an expedition leader. It's that time in the Himalaya that's really shaped me. I started climbing and guiding in the Himalaya in 1997. And in 2004, I started my own guiding company called Alpenglow Expeditions, focused on climbing, skiing, and trekking in the world's greater mountain ranges, in the high altitude peaks around the world. And since that first time in 1997 to the Himalaya, you know, I've been lucky to have some success, and I've spent 13 years guiding and climbing on Mount Everest, including obviously the most important Everest season, 2012, when I met Emily. Summited 8,000 meter peaks 17 times. As all of you know, there are 14 peaks over 8,000 meters. I haven't summited all 14. I've done multiple summits on a few of them, including 8 summits of Mount Everest, while supporting more than 75 climbers to also reach the summit successfully. And on May 23rd, 2017, I was lucky enough to stand on top of Mount Everest without supplemental oxygen. After 8 seasons of guiding other people to the summit of the mountain using supplemental oxygen, I really wanted to focus on my own personal project on the mountain to kind of re-embrace what had started me on this path in the first place, which was challenge and suffering on big mountains and kind of the unknown of the outcome. And so for me, I thought that would best be accomplished or challenged for me without oxygen. In 2016, I went with my Eddie Bauer teammate Corey Richards and failed less than 200 feet from the summit. In 2017, I went back with Corey again and was lucky enough to stand on top. I really excited and stoked in this photo, right? You know, summiting this peak without oxygen, it really was incredible. It ended up being a 43-hour round trip summit day for me, including this nap that I took on a ladder at 28,800 feet. I really depended so wholly on my teammates to get me down off the mountain as much as getting up. I had 2 Sherpa friends climbing with me, along with my filmer, Topo Esteban Mena. And I fell asleep repeatedly on the way down off the mountain and really don't know if I would have gotten down without my teammates. And that's something that I've never forgotten. It also led me to wondering whether, it was really a fluke just summiting this mountain that I knew so well. Had I just kind of like snuck it in, it was the only 8,000 meter peak I had ever done without supplemental oxygen. And as the years passed after climbing Everest without oxygen, I really kind of wondered, what it meant and whether it was just a lucky accident. And that led me last year to try one more, K2. The second tallest mountain in the world, and what's often called the Savage Mountain. Is one of the most dangerous high altitude 8,000 meter peaks with a 20% fatality rate. And I attempted, thanks to Eddie Bauer's support and with my Eddie Bauer teammate, Carla Perez from Ecuador. And this time we were really lucky to get just a perfect summit day after a really hard and challenging season. You could see I'm on top of the second tallest mountain in the world with no face covering, sunglasses, not goggles, wearing just thin Eddie Bauer leather gloves, and even had time to remember to pull out like sponsor and group flags of things that are important to me, like protect our winters. So 2019 really was a pretty cool season that I'm still kind of riding high on as we're stuck at home this spring. But really through all that, what I found in my career is that I love two things. I love personally pushing myself and suffering a lot. That's why I pick mountains. And I also love supporting others to achieve their big goals and suffer a lot. And that's why my career has sort of been split between being an athlete and being a mountain guide. And that's why M's goal to free climb El Capitan has been such a perfect project for both of us, and why we decided to spend just a few minutes talking about it tonight before we open this little hangout out to questions and conversation. So you got a few minutes left of us just filling the screen, but please throw questions at us through, I guess, the Q&A and chat function, and we're going to be gathering those together so we have something to talk about once we're done.
Yeah.
El Cap.
That was great. So we wanted to talk. It was great.
We don't present together that much.
No,
Actually, we do a lot of presentations separately. We also have never done a Zoom presentation together.
Have an audience.
Without an audience. Like, I don't know if you guys have been watching like the late night shows, like John Oliver and stuff like that. Like when they started, they were really awkward without an audience, and now they're killing it. I feel really awkward. How about you?
No, I'm actually good.
It's the margarita. Okay, here we go.
So we actually wanted to talk about one adventure that we've been having together, the two of us, that sort of complements both of our skills. And it all started in 2015. So I had diversified quite a bit. I'd moved to California after meeting Adrian in 2012, and I had started to learn how to big wall climb, how to trad climb. And one of my goals that I've had since I was a kid, sort of like peripherally, was that I wanted to try to free a route on El Capitan. Obviously, like what rock climber doesn't want to experience El Cap in Yosemite? It is the most famous big wall in the world. It is iconic and it's massive. It's 3,200 feet. And it's sort of the ideal combination between adventure and really hard rock climbing. Like I said before, El Cap is really hard. The easiest grade on it is 513. And I learned over the years that granite climbing is no joke. You can climb as many 514s on limestone as you can possibly imagine. And then you can go and get totally shut down on 5'9" granite if you haven't experienced it before. So for me, I sort of had to start over when I moved to California and started climbing on granite.
There were like a few short weeks in her first summer here where like, she'd struggle on like a 5'9" off width and I'd get to send it for her. It was like the best weeks of my life, and it's never happened 2 weeks again. Of that.
But so in order to free route on El Cap, you have to be a really good rock climber. You can't just be good at climbing in the gym. You can't just know how to campus or have strong fingers. Like, it's kind of like the whole package. In addition to that, most of the time you have to know how to exist in the vertical world for multiple days. There's a lot of logistics and there's a lot of experience required outside of just knowing how to rock climb in order to be successful up there. The route I had in mind initially was Golden Gate. It's a route that was put up by the Huber brothers. It's 41 pitches. It's mostly 5'10" and 5'11", but there's a few pitches of 5'13". And So you have to have all of the skills that I mentioned before in order to be successful. In addition, you need a good partner. That year, 2015, was actually the year of the really horrible earthquake in Nepal. And Adrian was on Everest and ended up coming home early because of the earthquake. And shockingly, he had never climbed in Yosemite before because he had always been in the Himalaya in spring and fall. So he came to Yosemite, and the first thing I did was try to set him up on a mandate with Alex Honnold to like take him rock climbing. And the one rule I had was don't go soloing. And the first thing that you did was go soloing. And he free soloed. What'd you do? You did after 6 first, which is a really easy 5-6.
After 7,
but then
after
progressively
8.
they went up and they free soloed the
And then the Nutcracker.
which is, if you've ever been to Yosemite and done that, it's the most slippery, like, I don't know, insecure 5-8 I've ever experienced.
Yeah, Alex, you're not watching,
Kind of
but if you are, you're really lucky you didn't kill me. And would have been
lucky.
Pissed.
Second, so that's a side note. Second route Adrian ever climbed in Yosemite was supporting me on the Golden Gate. So it's a great tip.
El Cap.
Yes.
Was it good for the season?
Yes. And thankfully he was there because a lot happened. There's a lot of logistics on climbing El Cap over multiple days that you don't think of, like making food, sleeping, not dropping things, going to the bathroom. Like nothing is mellow. You're kind of always doing something, and even when you're not climbing. And so it's really
John Glassberg photo.
It's a John Glassberg photo.
Still my favorite photo of us, I think, anywhere. Thanks, John.
So you're always doing something. In addition to that, the climbing is really varied and it's really intense. And that first trip up El Cap, I basically got my ass kicked. There was a lot of styles of climbing that I wasn't familiar with. A lot of you probably know what this pitch is. It's called the Monster Off Width. It is like a 6 or 7 inch wide crack that you just have to kind of like reverse cheese grater your way up. It took me 2.5 hours to reach the top. Adrian belayed for 2.5 hours, a hanging belay. It was awful for both of us. It was a horrible experience. I hated every second of it. I was panicking the entire time. I wore a hole in my elbow because I didn't have very good technique. And but I made it through. I think if I'd have fallen, I probably would have given up.
We would have gone down
not fall on that pitch. Yeah. On this pitch, it's called the move pitch. I spent 2 days falling on the same move. I split my finger wide open and I got really, really, really pissed off. So what I learned about trying to free climb a route on El Cap is that falling and failing and feeling like you're never, ever, ever going to be successful is sort of a big part of being up there. It's a big part of the experience. I had every sort of negative emotion go through my head. Like angry, frustrated, sad, super doubtful, no confidence. Like kind of, yeah, it was kind of heavy for a little bit. And it looked a little bit like this. This is a video. I don't know if it's going to be glitchy, but there's not any actual talking in it. So this is my fall montage.
No, I'm having some doubts. I just can't seem to put it together. I can't do this. I can't do it.
Okay.
Happy times.
Happy
times on El Cap.
But the thing about being on El Cap, like 2/3 of the way up, in that situation, is that the only way, like the easiest way to go actually is kind of up. There were a lot of mornings where I woke up and there was like not even the tiniest bit of me that thought that I could succeed. And I had just lost all confidence, but I just kept going. Like I just kept climbing. And I knew that as long as I kept trying, there was a chance that I could succeed, even if I didn't think I could. I also had Adrian there. And Adrian is, I don't know, you guys don't know him very well, but he's kind of a robot of positivity.
That's the nicest thing you've ever said about me.
Well, I mean, I did call you a robot first. He's a robot of positivity. So he's like pretty much happy and stoked all the time, no matter what he's doing or what situation he's in. And that was really beneficial to have up there. And eventually, after 6 days, I had climbed all the pitches cleanly and I reached the top. And it looked something like this. This is also a video. The point is that there were a lot of ups and downs during this journey. And I had a lot of moments of like fear and discomfort and pain, but there was a lot of euphoric moments as well. And it became one of my proudest achievements.
I felt a lot more confident.
There's like 40 more feet of hard climbing. Going right there. That's all I have to do. I'm glad it's over.
Deep down, I really didn't know if it was possible.
It's a miracle. I spent the last hard pitch on Golden Gate.
Oh my God, I could taste the tequila. Complete emotional release.
Can't really even explain what it felt like to stand on the top.
There's something about her that actually loves totally uncertain goals that are completely outside of her scope of knowledge.
And I'm really, really proud of what I did. There's a lot more that I want to learn and a lot more that I want to do. And I would love to go back and do it better. But for right now, I'm really satisfied.
Foreshadowing.
2015.
2015, fast forward to 2019. I returned to Yosemite, to El Cap, to Golden Gate. And this time I had the vision of free climbing it in a day. So free climbing El Cap in a day really distills the experience down into pure climbing. There's no hauling, there's no sleeping on the wall. You don't have to deal with any of those logistics, but there's an entirely different set of logistics because it's only about climbing and it's all about having one huge day of climbing, which is actually what I love most in probably mountain adventures, especially when we do them together. I think free climbing El Cap in a day really is the epitome of big wall free climbing. It's sort of like you have to have the mental and physical strength to move efficiently and quickly over 3,200 feet of really hard climbing. And I think that kind of is what it means to me to be a really good, well-rounded rock climber.
And it was hard for me to like really understand what it meant. Like having seen Emily work through 6 days on the face, 6 nights, 6 days, I don't know, like, and work pitches over and over and over again, and then be able to take a rest day or only do 3 pitches in the day. And then imagining doing things perfectly enough with a little least amount of energy put out on each pitch as possible to do the whole thing in a day. It was like really hard for me to conceptualize. Luckily, I got to be a part of it.
Yeah. But so last spring, Adrian was actually on Everest. And I spent the season in Yosemite. And I spent a lot of time up there with random people who I had met or friends. I think I counted, I had like 12 or 13 different climbing partners. Sometimes I went up there alone, like in this photo, to rehearse the moves. Because instead of, like Adrian is saying, having multiple days and a lot of tries and plenty of food and water and place to sleep, I really wanted to just like start on the ground and not stop until I reached the summit. And I got the opportunity to try in the spring with Alex Honnold, because he actually loves supporting people on these types of missions. It's like, I feel like he has just a great time and he's really good at it and he's really fast. And so he agreed to belay me for one
Alex
day.
is available for anyone's in a day attempt?
Yeah, just hit him up on Instagram. So he agreed to belay me in the beginning of June. He drove down and we got a really early start. The thing about the spring last year was we had a really, really, really big winter, a lot of snow and a lot of rain, even through May. And so a lot of the route was super wet. So I climbed probably, I would say 60% of the route was wet. I reached the down climb, which is kind of the first pitch that breaks off onto the Golden Gate. It's 13A, like 20-foot down climb. It's super heinous. It's a slab. It's very frustrating. And I reached that point after 7 hours of climbing mostly wet rock. And I just like, it was like I'd had my hands in a bathtub for 7 hours. Like my skin was completely wrecked. I was just sliding on everything. My feet hurt. And I kind of decided to bail. I decided to bail at that point. After that point, you can't really go down that easily. You can only go up. And we had a 50% chance of rain that day. So it was sort of like a Hail Mary effort. So we decided to bail, and we were really glad that we did, because this is what El Cap looked like 45 minutes later.
Wait, what's happening?
Dude, we're going canyoneering down El Cap. This is so crazy.
Okay, so we were canyoneering. I returned in the fall, this time with a dedicated partner. I had Adrian all fall with me, supporting me.
My first time spending a full season in Yosemite.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Dedicated.
We did some classics, and then we spent a few weeks on the Golden Gate rehearsing pitches from the top, from the bottom. Adrian got to do a lot of climbing himself. He got to follow a lot of the pitches, which was really fun. I got to try in early November, also again with Alex, and I had just an amazing day in early November. We climbed so fast. I climbed really well. This is a picture of me on the monster. This time it only took me 40 minutes to do it. It was just an amazing day. I thought I was going to send. I was so psyched. And then I reached this pitch, the A5 Traverse. It's a 13A Traverse. And I ended up failing like literally 15 feet from the anchor, 4 pitches from the top. This was the last hard pitch. So I was pretty disappointed, but I also was like, wow, that was a solid effort. I think I can do this. A lot of times I set goals for myself and I'm sort of like not sure if they're possible. It's almost comforting. It's almost more comforting when you don't know if something's possible, just to go try. But now I was like, oh, I can actually do it. So I rested a week and I wanted to try one more time before a big storm shut down Yosemite and ended the season. And this was this past November. I think I was probably pretty tired though from my effort. I was definitely feeling pressure. I definitely felt like I could do it and I should do it. Again, Alex was supporting me. I started really early in the morning. I actually was starting up the first pitch. We were planning on simul climbing just like we had before, and it had gotten really, really cold. It was late November, and I slipped off the first pitch and took a really bad fall. I fell probably 50 feet, hit a ledge, had to be rescued by Yosar, full on super scary style.
It's a whole nother show.
It's a whole nother show. I ended up in the hospital. Thankfully, no like serious injuries. I had a concussion. I was super banged up. But in the end, I think I learned quite a bit. And that was the end of our season. And we were planning on resting and chilling for a little bit and then training really hard this winter and going back this spring. But now we're here. We're here just like everyone else.
We're here. Best laid plans.
Just sort of dreaming. You know, I think you can never really tell what's going to happen in the future. I don't think anyone of us foresaw this from happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a last slide, and you know, kind of just we threw this in, and kind of really reminds me like it's so important to plan, and it's so important to dream big and have these huge overarching goals that might take years to accomplish and you work so hard for, and then like life happens and all of a sudden you're like sitting in your car with your weird face masks and your hand sanitizer from the only company that you could find, and it took like 3 weeks to get, and it's super gross and we don't even think it has any actual alcohol in it. And we're doing hangouts at the Clubhouse with the American Alpine Club. So we wanted to keep our little intro presentation, you know, sort of shortish so we could actually like have a conversation and chat. So that's us, and thanks for watching.
So,
and I think, do we have to unshare? Oh, hi Heidi.
Hey gang, Adrian, Emily. First off, a proper virtual cheers. It was a great presentation.
Cheers.
No 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock your time presentation is complete without something delicious to sip on.
Absolutely.
Cheers to you all. And yeah, for those of you out there in the tuning in, I'm Heidi. I'm the AAC's events director and stoked to be here in the Clubhouse live with Adrian and Emily. And now we've got some questions from the audience. We've had a bunch of folks tuned in while y'all were chatting, so we've got some good questions. The first one is from Angela B. She's wondering, Emily, how do you manage your fear on the wall?
How much time do you have?
This is a good one. Actually, Angela, I did a 3-minute TED Talk about this. You could probably find it on YouTube. But essentially, I've always found that being afraid is a very natural and normal emotion to have. And I think that like the first step to understanding it and to dealing with it is to accept it and recognize that it's never going to go away. Like when I was a kid, I always thought that somehow I could like beat my fear and I wouldn't be afraid and I would be fearless and it would be awesome, like a superhero. But then I realized that maybe superheroes are also afraid. And it's just sort of learning how to manage it and how to deal with it. And for me, I think it's definitely a step-by-step process that I go through every single time. So the first time I go to Yosemite, it'll probably be even more intense this time because the last time I was there, I ended up in an ambulance. I'm super terrified. I'm super scared. I don't even know like how to trust my rope. I can't even focus on climbing. And I think just kind of accepting that like, okay, this is a part of it. Like being afraid is definitely a part of it. And it's almost like you kind of like tiptoe outside your comfort zone every time, and then take a step back if it's too much, and then keep tiptoeing outside your comfort zone. I think the important thing is to not like traumatize yourself and not be super hard on yourself. I'm super guilty of this. Like I could be so hard on myself if I feel more afraid than I want to feel. But I think in the end, you have to realize that it's always going to be a process. It's always going to be there, and you're always going to have to kind of develop a relationship with your fear and learn how to get past it. So for me, it's like, I'm always afraid, essentially. There are times when I'm a lot better at managing it than others, and I think it just takes time.
Love that question, because fear is definitely something that I think every single climber, except maybe Alex Honnold, faces on a day-to-day basis. Every time we rope up, it's a lot.
Exactly.
So I have another question from the audience. This one's coming at us from Katie M. And she's wondering if you ever have issues with self-doubt or competitiveness when comparing each other's accomplishments. Be honest, it's okay to be competitive.
Great
These are really good questions. Yes.
Do you want to dive in?
Yeah. I mean, I have issues with self-doubt every day. Especially right now when everything's uncertain and we don't know what's going on, and I'm sort of like still trying to train and be really grateful for what I have, but also just kind of confused about the world. I think it's really easy to like fall into that cycle of being like, well, why am I even doing this? I'm not even like, I'm not going to succeed. I'm going to, just kind of like falling into that negative self-talk. And I think for me, expressing it has been most helpful. And competitiveness, I think I do personally get a little bit competitive sometimes, just because I feel like Adrian has kind of achieved a lot of his life dreams, like Everest without oxygen, K2 without oxygen, like running a successful business, like all of these things.
Is that just because he's older and he's had more years to do
Exactly.
it?
He always
more
says
years.
that. That's what he always says, but I don't really hear it.
Thanks for pointing that out, Heidi. Nice.
But for me, it's like I haven't gotten there yet. I haven't gotten that one thing that I really want so badly. And so it is hard. Sometimes I do fall, like, once again, it's usually when I'm doubting myself that then you like can fall into that trap. And lately it's been like, because we've been just us together, like we don't see other people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really easy to fall into that.
Yeah, it's a really intense time, right? I mean, I think we've been lucky overall in our careers, like from a competitive point of view, that we're kind of like at different ends of the climbing spectrum. I'm really good at walking up snowy hills and I'm really average at rock climbing. And Em's like this totally unbelievable rock climber and good at high altitude, but it will never be your like core passion. And so we can play in each other's worlds, but we're not competing directly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, especially just being trapped and kind of having so many unknowns to the future and what our lives look like, we certainly have challenges around that stuff.
For sure.
Right. So the next question comes from the AAC's 2020 Volunteer of the Year, David Thonin, and it's for you, Adrian.
Yeah, David.
He's wondering if at this point in your career, if you're done with Everest from the perspective of personal objectives, like is it more of a business activity for you at this point since you've done it X number of times?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm still very personally passionate about being on Everest and being a part of like the Everest culture or scene and wanting to help that mountain to stay pristine and sacred in a way that I think it's really challenged right now. So I still have a lot of personal passion around the mountain, but you're right, I don't have another personal passion for my own climbing on the mountain. I made a decision after summiting Everest without supplemental oxygen that I wouldn't climb the mountain without oxygen again, for example. Like it came so close, I think, to killing me that I don't want to go there again. So when my partner, Corey Richards, invited me to go and attempt a new route on the mountain, that's a project that I chose not to take on. I'd rather, if I am going to try other mountains, or more no oxygen climbing, which I'd really like to, it will be on other mountains, not Everest. So yeah, my interest in Everest is a bit more professional and a bit more big picture.
Great. So this next question is kind of a two-part. Actually, I seeded this question because well, you'll see when I ask it. So, Emily, you have a fairly iconic hairstyle. From one braid lover to another, I have to ask, and so actually does one of our audience members, Charlotte H., wondering if you have a favorite braid style. And she specifically, and I love this, she specifically used the word power braids.
Yes.
Power braids. Ooh,
Yeah,
I love that.
Hashtag power braids.
Power braids.
They are definitely part of your superhero.
They are a
thing.
part of it. I would like to say that the reason, the braids are awesome because they look good and they make you feel really good, but they're also really, really practical because you can braid your hair, or I braid my hair and then I leave it in for days. And it keeps your hair cleaner. It keeps it from tangling, like a ponytail when you're outside in the wind, like it just gets messy. And it's just really a really easy hairstyle to manage. But I would say my favorite, lately I'm really into the Dutch braid, which like opposite the French braid. The French braid is when you put the outside pieces over. The Dutch braid is when you put them under. So it kind of like sticks out on your head. Today I'm rocking two. Lately I've been rocking one just down the center, and I'm kind of into that lately. I've also experimented with the fishtail, but that tends to get really tangled and hard to take out. I really like them all. So I think the classic is the double, but I've sort of been trying to experiment with different ones. I follow a lot of Instagram handles about braiding. I watch a lot of YouTube videos about braiding. It's actually a very easy skill to learn if you just do a little research. So everyone should get into it because it's awesome.
I am psyched to hear how many braid-related resources there are.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. There's a lot.
This Clubhouse Live is over, I'm Googling braids.
You should.
I'm inspired.
Yeah.
So Phil P has a question, also for you, Emily. It's part question and part compliment, actually. So brace yourself. Comp champ, free routes on big walls, Everest, and big skis. Is there another aspect of climbing you think you would still like to add to your amazing and versatile run as a climber?
Well, thank you for that. That's very kind. I have a few like really big goals that I want to achieve. And they're all sort of like within the realm of climbing. I still really want to sport climb harder. I've always had the dream of sport climbing 14C, and I have yet to do that. So I've sort of been working really hard towards that goal. And then this goal of free climbing Golden Gate in a day is a really big deal for me. And it's sort of become like my ultimate dream. There are other things like on the sidelines that I could totally see myself going into. Like I'd love to, for Adrian and I, it'd be great if we could go climb and ski another 8,000 meter peak. That would be amazing. Just because like going on expeditions is something that we share and we love doing together. But I think for me, it's just like I'd like to level up on each of the different disciplines that I've sort of explored in the past. But the main one is like just be a better overall rock climber and mountain athlete and mountain partner.
Oh, yeah.
That's a perfect segue into the next question that we have, which is what projects will you be looking to do together in the next year, or whenever the world is normal again?
Do you want to talk about your project?
Sure.
Adrian
So
has a project.
I have a project.
We've been working towards it.
Totally. So I basically, like I mentioned in the slideshow, so I summited K2 without oxygen this past summer, and it was like this incredible experience for me that went so wrong and then went so right, and I was so proud of and so happy to come out of it alive. And after that, I wanted to take a big long break from high altitude climbing, especially high altitude climbing without oxygen. And so I decided to focus on sport climbing. Like, even though I've been climbing since I was 12 years old, I've actually basically been a 512 climber forever and never really broken through that and never really projected routes before. And so when I came home in August, I basically took on Emily Harrington as my coach, and I'm trying to train with a goal to climb 8A or 513B, sport climbing, like pure sport climbing, like a classic hard route. I've always been really bad on steep climbing. I only like climbing vertical, so trying to step out of that and choose like a steep, hard sport climb. So that's actually what we were working on, or what I was working on when coronavirus really hit. We were in Spain on a 6-week trip to Oliana, Spain, with the primary goal being me climbing 8A. And I was a long way away from that, but feeling really good and having a great time. And now being stuck here at home seems like an opportunity to really work on my weaknesses, which are like power and pull-ups and core and all these things that sport climbers have and I don't have. So I'm trying to take this as an opportunity to get stronger. And I think we're hoping to go sport climbing sometime soonish, somewhere in the world. So I want to climb 8A. That's my goal.
Yeah, and I want to support Adrian in that, and then also I love sport climbing, so try to pursue try to climb my hardest sport grade. But my primary goal is still to try to finish off the project in Yosemite whenever Yosemite opens. At this point, I'm sort of looking to the fall, hoping that I'll have a fall season there. So.
And kind of an answer to your question, both of those projects we're planning on doing together.
Yeah.
So Em's supporting me as much as she can stand in my sport climbing. And then me, I just can't wait for another full season in Yosemite, because the cool thing about supporting Em on El Cap is like, I get to climb like 90-something% of the pitches on like the best piece of stone on the planet. And she gets to attempt her project. And it's been really interesting. Like, now I have this like way out there goal of like, could I free climb a route on El Cap, like free rider, like over probably a month on the wall, on a day. But it's really inspiring to see what Emily and other climbers there are doing on this like just crazy piece of stone. So.
Well, as the saying goes, teamwork makes the dream work. So it sounds like you're on the right path to success.
Definitely works for us.
Yeah. So the next question kind of ties in a bit to what you all were talking about, which is, how are you at home dealing with being quarantined? And this question comes from KDM, who I think, like many of us, is missing climbing and skiing so much that it hurts sometimes. So she's wondering how you're staying sane Obviously, Adrian, you have one of the world's best climbing coaches at your disposal,
Yes.
so that certainly doesn't
I have a coach, we have a hangboard and a climbing wall, and I'm a robot, so it's
He's a
pretty
robot.
easy for me.
Adrian actually is a robot of positivity and doesn't seem as affected. But I've definitely had a lot of ups and downs. And you have as well, like with, obviously there's a lot of other stresses, like with business and stuff like that. But we've just been like doing our best to like stay busy, be nice to ourselves, which is kind of hard to do sometimes, and like realize that it's okay to feel unmotivated and unproductive and like maybe a little bit depressed. But for the most part, we've been training a lot. Like we have a hangboard, we've been doing that a bunch. We're really lucky that we have we actually have a moonboard and a tread wall, so we've been able to climb and train on that.
We have great running right out
Yeah,
our
we've
door, like
been
trails
getting
in
outside
Tahoe,
and like
filled with bears.
we love our dog, so we've been like hanging out with our dog and cooking a lot and making margaritas. And I mean, it's the same thing everyone else is doing. Like some days are like better than others, and there's nothing really else to say about that. We're all just kind of doing it together. I think the most comforting thing for me is like everyone's also doing it together. Everyone's also going through the same thing. It's this very collective experience, even though we're all very separated.
FOMO would be hard if like Europe was just raging sport climbing right now, and we were so like
literally everyone in the world,
everyone is doing it,
having the same issue, and it's really interesting in a way. To think about it that way.
And the thing I'd add, like I think we as climbers are actually kind of lucky, like everyone watching tonight and like part of the American Alpine Club, like we do this in many ways all the time. I think in the mountains, like we go out and there's huge unknowns and there's so many things we can't control, like the weather and avalanche conditions and oftentimes health and there's just so many things we can't control, and the outcome is always unknown. A lot of times we don't know if we're going to be on a mountain for 4 days or 4 weeks to actually get the opportunity to try to summit it. And I kind of feel like that sets us up well in some ways for this situation we're in now, because like what I try to remind myself each day when I start going into like the rabbit hole, which I do, is like you control what you can control. And all we can control right now is like getting outside every day, training, sleeping really well, trying to eat well and being kind to ourselves. And like the rest of the world kind of needs to like do its thing too. And so I actually think mountaineering really helps in staying sane during this time.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those situations where united we quarantine, united we're stronger in that sense. So it's always great to get tips for how everybody is handling it, because we are so in this together. So something you mentioned actually is a great lead into one of our next audience questions. This one's coming to us from Emily O, who is wondering how you cope with fear of each other getting hurt or being in danger during your projects. She and her partner are both mountaineers, and she says that she tends to worry more for his safety than hers. So yeah, how do you deal with that, especially when you're not together, I guess?
Heavy, great question. Do you want me to start?
You can start.
I mean, I think the reason I kind of wanted to start is actually going through Emily's accident this fall was a really new experience for me. I think like I've tended to, in my brain, be like, oh, I'm the one that goes off and takes risk, and maybe the other person in my relationship worries about me. But it's been easier for me to be like, oh, Em's climbing is pretty safe. Trying to climb El Cap in a day means taking on certain risks and cutting out some of the safety systems you use in rock climbing to move faster to try to accomplish the goal. And so when Em fell, she was climbing with Alex, and I was going around to the top of El Cap to rappel in and kind of sub in for Alex 2,000 feet up the wall. We had this whole plan of how we'd support Emily through her full day of climbing. And so I actually wasn't there when she fell. And I got that like crazy text message, right? In a place with almost no service, hiking up around the side of El Cap, like, Em's fallen, it's not okay. We're calling Yosel for a rescue. And that's all the details I had. And I was with a filmer friend, Tara, and she was like supporting me as I kind of went through all these stages of like, fuck, like this could change or destroy our entire like life as I had kind of seen it in our plan. And it was really hard. And so that's not an answer to your question, except acknowledging that it is hard when your partner adventures and life is dangerous and what we do has risks. And like, I think the only advice I have is like, I know I trust Emily and I trust her decision making. And I trust that if she chooses to take a risk, like, you know, simul climbing with Alex and only placing 2 pieces of gear on a 200-foot pitch, that's because she believes that risk is worth taking to accomplish the goal that she set for herself. And so I believe that too. And I kind of have to hold on to that. Like when she fell, like I was so scared, but I also was trying to hold on to the fact that like this was worth it for Emily. She knew this risk existed. We've talked about it. And so like I have to be proud of her attempt and try to hold on to that. I think that's what I got.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I've definitely been through it a little bit more just because of like Adrian failing to climb Everest without oxygen the first year and then succeeding the second year, but it was super dangerous. And then going to K2, which is like a super dangerous mountain. And, you know, obviously we've lost a lot of friends in the mountains and been through a lot with that. And so there's this part of me that instead of like thinking that that'll never happen to me, it's like, why wouldn't that eventually happen to us? That's sort of been my thought process when these types of things happen. And before Adrian went to K2, we had the conversation of like, is it really worth it to you? Like, do you really want to do this? Is this something that you are willing to take that kind of risk for? And we went through all of the emotions and the whole cycle of it. And for me, what I ended up doing was like, he went away to K2 and I was a little bit, it was the first time that I was like a little bit less communicative, I would say. Like I went to Peru and went on my own trip and kind of had to do my own thing and kind of had to, I mean, we were still communicating, but I like was a little bit more emotionally distant from his expedition. Like in past years, I've been like very focused on what he was doing all the time and what was happening and what was going on, and going back to like the saying that like you can only control what you can control. At that point, I'd sort of been like, okay, this is Adrian's trip. He really wants to do this. Whatever happens is like, that's our reality. And that's what I have to accept. And I'm going to go on my trip and I'm going to do my thing. And I'm going to try to focus on that as much as I possibly can. And it's not to say it's not hard. It's just like, was my way of coping with it. I don't think it gets easier. I don't think it gets better in any way. I just think it kind of just is what it is, and you just accept it.
I have to say, I think it's super inspiring the way that you work through that and support each other in your individual goals. And yeah, it's really cool to see a couple that can go and do big and epic things together. It's a real partner. Yeah.
It's fun.
Oh, yes. So Christopher D is, Brad F, sorry, is wondering, Adrian, if you can talk about your use of hypoxico. I'm pretty sure I just butchered that word.
Oh, you're good. You're doing great.
All right, 10 points for Heidi. Hypoxico altitude training systems in your accelerated Himalayan climbs.
Yeah, wow, I love that question. So, you know, gosh, details, not details. I mean, so first of all, where it all started was essentially I was living 8 months or more a year in a tent on the side of high altitude mountains around the world. And back in like 2006, 2007, 2008. And that sounds amazing. And it was amazing, but it was also like I had no relationship or no successful relationship, no life, no friends, no dog, no home. Like I was in a tent 8 months a year living on mountains. And a huge part of that time is waiting for your body to acclimatize, to make changes, physiological changes like build red blood cells so you can climb to higher altitudes. And a huge amount of that time is doing things like drinking whiskey and playing cards. It's kind of like coronavirus, like I'm drinking a lot of whiskey and playing cards these days, but like I don't always want half of my life to be that. And so I started hearing about high altitude or pre-acclimatization systems that endurance athletes were using before going and doing things like running the Leadville 100, the 100-mile race in Colorado that's all above 10,000 feet. And they were using these systems because they couldn't just move to Colorado before the race, and it was giving them benefits. And so we, a few other climbers and me back in 2012 started trying to use these tents to see if we could pre-acclimatize some before going to 8,000 meter peaks like Everest. And I found the systems to be incredibly successful, both for me, my guides at Alpenglow Expeditions, and we started using them voluntarily on clients who were willing to be guinea pigs. And we were doing things like flying 8 clients who live in cities like New York and London and San Francisco at sea level, helicoptering them to base camps at as high as 19,000 feet in Nepal. And they were able to hit the ground and immediately start climbing instead of spending 2 weeks or more acclimatizing. And I was blown away and really excited that we might be able to shorten trips, which would selfishly help me in my life, potentially have a successful relationship. And like other people who also feel like kind of like time stressed for their adventures and their fun. It's climbing Everest traditionally has been a 2.5 month long trip, which is a lot of time away from work and play and family. And so we just started experimenting with the tents and using them first on 8,000 meter peaks, then 7,000 meter peaks, then 6,000 meter peaks. And now pretty much all of the trips my guide company Alpenglow runs are 30 to 50% shorter than they used to be. We have a higher success rate than we did 10 years ago because people stay healthier and they're less likely to get pulled off the trip to go home to deal with a home emergency or work emergency because their trip is shorter. So our Everest trips now, we don't even run long trips. No Everest trip at Alpenglow is longer than 35 days. And we also do things like climb 20,000 foot volcanoes in Ecuador on long weekends, fly down on Thursday, summit a 20,000 foot peak on Saturday, fly home on Sunday. It's kind of like climbing Rainier, but now you can do it on a 20,000 foot peak. So we do it a load now on trips together as well.
That's so cool. It seems like such an incredible technology. Awesome to have access to that like higher level training and see how it continues to progress as we push the boundaries of climbing. Or I should say more accurately, you all push the boundaries of climbing. I'm more of a 5 fun climber myself.
Me too.
Perfect.
Let's see. We have time for a few more questions. There's been some awesome questions from the audience and a bunch of them. Sadly, we won't get to all of them today because heaven forbid you two run out of a margarita, like drink it all. No, we don't want that. So we're only
look at these empty glasses. We didn't prepare well enough.
You got to go with the pint glasses for the hour.
Exactly. We should have done that.
Gumby move.
From a pro.
Gumby move for sure.
You've been doing more Zooms than me.
Yes, you have.
Yeah. Noted for next time. So this next question comes from Christopher D. He wonders what you guys do to separate yourself from your objectives and social media in a way that helps you maintain the stoke and the fire.
Ooh, that's a great question. That's been something I've been struggling with a little bit recently, just because it seems like now, like everyone's always talking about how this whole quarantine time is boring and nobody has anything to do, but I feel like we have like a lot. We've been doing a lot and we've been trying to do a lot of media and trying to like provide content and just be really active with it. Because it sort of felt like that was our job at the time. Like it's created a space for us to kind of like come into.
And everyone's companies from small to big are suffering, right? So we're like trying to help Alpenglow Expeditions, my little guide company, like survive by doing lots of social. But we're also trying to help like Eddie Bauer and the North Face. And
there's a lot of like, we need to
nonprofits.
storytell and like, you know, like all of this stuff, and it's all really good. But at the same time, there's moments where we're like, oh wow, it's just kind of, it's been a little bit exhausting at times. So actually what we just did is we just went camping for 3 days. We just like we drove the truck like to the woods and like went camping and didn't have service, and that was really nice. I think there's definitely a balance to it, and just sort of knowing like when you need to take a break from it. Like we were also doing our Dangerous Stick TV lives, like our little YouTube channel. We were doing live Instagrams every day, and we started like back in March. In the last week we haven't really done them because I just was like a little bit too overwhelmed by everything to do it. So I think just kind of like knowing when it's okay to step away. But it's hard. I think it's hard.
It's really easy for me, especially more than you, to be on a screen like 15 hours a day, like for some reason, or like, yeah, like I don't know, like I do a lot of work for Alpenglow, then I try to do my social media stuff, then I listen to podcasts for 2 hours while going on a run. So I'm out running, but I'm also listening to podcasts about like the current news, and
you're trying to catch up with friends and you're trying to see family. So it's a lot, actually. I think it's important to try to like limit it, but it's just, I mean, right now, like all the rules go out the window. Just, I don't know, try to be nice to yourself.
But being okay with taking breaks. Like we left for 3 days.
Yeah, we did.
We didn't tell anyone except our families. We didn't make a big deal on social media. Like we're turning off for 3 days. We just went away. And guess what? No one cared. And it was all the same when we came back 3 days later.
I care.
So like, and that's not necessarily endorsing going out and taking risk in the backyard or like going on big adventures or traveling thousands of miles to go on adventures. But like, you know, if you are lucky enough to be able to go out in a park or go outside or just turn off, I think there's a lot of value in that. We've been seeing like friends with kids, like just setting up the tent and camping in the backyard. And you know what? Camping is awesome. Like so much of my life, camping is like a chore that we have to do to achieve the goal we're going after, like climbing a big mountain or rock climbing. And actually just going camping for camping was super rad. We made rad dinners and we drank Manhattans and margaritas, and like it was car camping. So I brought a coffee grinder and made great coffee every morning. It's like camping's so rad.
That's fun.
Love it. Well, let's bring it home with a non-screen based activity question. This one comes to us from Nina V. And she's wondering if you can recommend some of your favorite good reads about climbing or mountaineering. Although I guess it is a screen-based activity if people are Kindle-based, but maybe they have access to some good old-fashioned paperbacks. So yeah, what books have really captured your attention?
I really liked Tommy Caldwell's book. I thought it was really good. Yeah, it was awesome.
God, you just stole the best one.
I don't read that many climbing books though.
I mean, I would say the kind of what started me on this path, and like I revisited one recently, like Reinhold Messner, everything Reinhold Messner wrote about being the first, about his attempts to be the first person to climb all 14 8,000 meter peaks without oxygen, including being the first person to climb Everest without oxygen. They are so inspiring because he was so far, he was generationally ahead of the curve in what was believed to be possible. And he changed the sport forever. So pick up a Reinhold Messner book.
There you go.
He is an epic legend in the climbing community. We had him at the 2015 annual benefit dinner, and wow, what a man. Speaker, just climber, like, fantastic.
If there's one more that like Corey Rich's new book that if you follow him on Instagram, and he's been reading chapters to his daughter.
It's really
like
cute.
I don't even know the name of the book. I should run downstairs and get it, but it's like so good. It's stories from his life as a photographer and climber, and they're like beautiful and digestible, and it's new. So
and if you have kids, Ashima Shiriashi just came out with a book called How to Solve a Problem, and it's adorable.
It's a kid's book with awesome drawings.
It's a really adorable kid's book. So you have the full gamut now.
This went to 4 books.
Yeah, we got it.
There you have it. One's even a picture book, I assume. So we covered like the full spectrum from Reinhold Messner to the future generations of climbers and everything in between.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both, Adrian and Emily, so much for joining us in the AAC Clubhouse Live. For those of you who joined us from the comfort of your couches or your dining room table or wherever in your home you are joining us from, thank you for tuning in. As a reminder, these are weekly events, so be sure to check back next Thursday. That's May 7th. We'll have the AAC Conservation Crew. They're climbing into the clubhouse. Little climbing pun for you there. We've got Katie Bowie, Dr. Len Nessifer, Micah Berhart, and Taylor Lunau coming together to discuss the intersection of climbing and advocacy. It's an important intersection. They're going to give you some updates on where we stand and all kinds of good tidbits in that space. More info's on the AAC website and Facebook, so check those out. And you know, at the end of the day, I'm biased because I work for the AAC, but I think it's a magical organization. And so if you enjoyed this session, if you believe in the club's work, and it's within your means, consider making a small donation to support your AAC. Every dollar matters, and even the donation of a single dollar, it helps us in our mission. So you can give by texting. That's right, we're high tech people. You can text the word uniting, that's UNITING, uniting, to 44321. We'll have that in the comments in case you didn't happen to have a pen in front of you. But yeah, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in to the AAC's Clubhouse Live. Shout out to Adrian and Emily. If y'all don't follow them on Instagram and their YouTube channel, Danger Stick TV, give it a watch, give it a like, check them out.
Thanks so much, Heidi, and thanks to everyone for the great questions. We love doing this, getting to hang out.
That was awesome.
Yeah, Clubhouse. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.